Ani Benjamin Shapiro, as a Jew and as an American, I light this torch in honor of Israel.
There's a vast disparity between the number of Palestinians being killed and the number of Israelis.
If based on the numbers, more Germans died than Brits in World War II, did that mean that the British were wrong in World War II?
Britain wasn't bombing civilians.
It seems to me that what's been happening in Israel is a manifestation of a broader philosophy that has taken over huge swaths of the left.
In large numbers of children and civilians, how can you continue to condone those actions?
Okay, I don't just condone the actions of the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli government. I celebrate and laud them. I want to ask, if you've served over the course of the last year, please stand up. That's unique. It's something that doesn't exist in the West anymore. Here I am in the most important place in the world, overlooking the Kotel and the Temple Mount.
לבן שפירו יש הרבה תארים. עורך דין, איש עסקים, סופר, פרשן ועיתונאי. כוכבו דרך אחרי שהתפטר מהאתר השמרני ברייטברט בכדי להקים אימפריית תקשורת ופודקאסטים, והוא הפך לאחד מהקולות הבולטים של הימין האמריקאי. בשנתיים האחרונות כבש את הכותרות בזכות תמיכתו הבלתי מתפשרת בישראל.
Would the world look better if it looked more like Israel, or would it look better if it looked more like, say, the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, or the Gaza Strip under Hamas? Yeah, that's a very, very simple question, and it's a very easy question to answer, and nobody wants to answer it.
השבוע הוא גם הוציא ספר חדש.
I'm here with Megan in studio, and I'm bestowing her with the greatest gift one person can give another, a copy of my book, which I'm sure she will treasure forever.
צלנו את ההזדמנות כדי לשבת איתו לראיון.
Ben Shapiro, thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
While we're speaking, the Middle East is changing. Did you believe that it will look like it looks today on October 7?
I think it would have been very difficult to picture the Middle East looking the way that it looks today on October 7th. I mean, Israel's in an incredibly vulnerable position on October 7th and in the days that immediately followed. Hezbollah was obviously poised in Lebanon with presumably hundreds of thousands of rockets, many of which were tipped with actual directive technologies. Iran was seen as a major threat to the state of Israel. And now Israel obviously is standing on the other side of Mount Hermon, the Syrian regime having been toppled. Hezbollah has been essentially defenestrated as a massive fighting force in Lebanon, with the Lebanese government actually considering disarming Hezbollah. Iran has attacked and its nuclear facilities, if not obliterated, then at least significantly damaged with the help of the United States as well. And Israel has achieved military superiority in Gaza, even though obviously there are still things left to be done in the Gaza Strip. So just from a purely military perspective, in terms of how the country has held up militarily, in terms of the people of Israel, it's been an astonishing performance.
What is it about Hitler? Why is he the most evil? Well, the first thing people would say is, well, an ethnic cleansing almost took place. And now I offer back, you mean like we actually did to the Germans? I hope nobody supports Israel ever again.
במסגרת עמידתו הנחרצת לצד ישראל, פיטר שפירו את קנדנס אוונס, פרשנית ימנית שהפכה מאז ה7 באוקטובר למשפיענית אנטי-ישראלית.
In the first days, weeks, and even months after October 7, the Western world stood with Israel in 100%. But lately, we see things are changing, mainly in the Western world, in European countries and some other countries. They want to recognize Palestinian state. Some of them speaks about genocide. The U.S. still stands with Israel. Do you think this will change?
I don't believe that's going to change under President Trump. I think certainly, depending on who's president next, that could certainly change. But President Trump is, bar none, easily the most pro-Israel president in the history of the state of Israel. It is not remotely close. And President Trump has not only been pro-Israel, he's been pro-civilization in a way many other Western leaders simply are not. He has moral clarity in a way that much of the West fails to actually demonstrate. And again, I think that a lot of the sympathy in the aftermath of October 7th for Israel, particularly from Western Europe, was fake. I think a lot of that was based on a perception of victimhood. But the minute that Israel went on the offensive and actually had to take care of business, you saw that narrative shift.
I can confirm the UK will recognize the state of Palestine.
Le seul moyen d'y arriver, c'est qu'il y ait un État de Palestine, un État d'Israël qui vivent côte à côte, se reconnaissant mutuellement et reconnaissant le droit de chacun de vivre en sécurité.
It didn't take 2 years for France to shift. It may have taken 2 years for France to get to the point where they were going to reward Hamas for its terror by suggesting a Palestinian state. But obviously, its sympathies had already shifted in the early months of the war. So it took about 5 minutes for the Western world to start falling off of the bandwagon.
So what do you think Israel should do with those countries?
I think when it comes to France, I think that many of the measures that the government's taking, expelling ambassadors, shutting down a Palestinian embassy or the talk of a Palestinian embassy, defunding the Palestinian Authority if it attempts to unilaterally declare a state, I think all of those are appropriate. Those governments should be put on notice that there are two sides to any relationship. And if Israel declared that there was suddenly a state of breakaway France, then the French government would treat Israel with proper ire and rage. And so France doing the same thing with regard to a state that would undoubtedly be run by moral enemies of the state of Israel who would immediately use it as a terror base to kill Jews. Israel should treat France precisely the same. And the fact is that Israel is not nearly as dependent on France as Israel seems to believe it is sometimes. And France will be dependent on Israeli technology. The French economy is flailing. The country is in serious trouble. And we're now living in a sort of post-moral world where power is everything. And in international relations, that may have always been the case, but Israel has gained regional power, it's gained technological power, and it should flex it.
Speaking about dependence, what do you think about the dependence that Israel still has on the U.S. armament?
I think it's a huge mistake. I've been advocating for Israel to get off of American military aid for years. The truth, of course, is that the United States likes for Israel to be, militarily speaking, connected via military aid, because not only is it a subsidy to American defense contractors, but also it means that America has first access to Israeli military tech and Israeli military tech development. It also means that Israeli firms are not able to market to particular sectors of the world because of the MOU. So it does benefit America that aid relationship exists. It's not as though Israel needs the money. Israel is one of the wealthier Western countries at this point in terms of GDP per capita. So it really is more about the restrictions on Israeli military technology and dissemination. I think that the strongest move Israel could make right now is to say to the Trump administration that Israel wishes to sign one more MOU, and after that MOU, there are no more MOUs, and Israel should get to work building its own independent military capacity sufficient that it doesn't have to be dependent on the vicissitudes of Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or anybody else.
I just want to know, how hard was it to generate AI generated images of Hamas?
So you should take off your mask now. Not really because what you're saying is so anti-Semitic, but just because what you're saying is so unbelievably stupid that I hope employers take a good stock of a person who does something so dumb. If Israel put down its guns tomorrow, there would be a second Holocaust. If the Palestinians put down their guns tomorrow, there would be a Palestinian state. That is the reality.
שפירו הוא כאמור מומחה למה שקוראים לו הסברה. על רקע האירועים האחרונים של קמפיין ההרעבה והתקרית בנאצר שישראל מיהרה להתנצל עליה, יש לו גם מה לומר על הדרך בה מדינת ישראל והתקשורת הישראלית מתמודדות עם האירועים האלה.
I think that so much focus in Israel is put on the idea that if you say the right words, the world is going to be sympathetic. And I just don't think that that's the case. I think that obviously, Israel can handle these things better. They should have faster response. They should be less apologetic, frankly, in how they approach the events of war, because war is brutal. War is terrible. It is meant to be so. That does not mean that Israel is targeting civilians. It obviously is not. But with that said, the biggest mistake I think that Israel has historically made with regard to Western public opinion is this belief that if Israel is absolutely careful and meticulous, somehow that is going to buy the love of the West or fealty of Western countries or even the beneficence of Western countries. And it just isn't true. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Israel, just from public relations perspective, would have been better off moving fast, moving hard, and finishing this war in 6 months rather than taking 2 years to be meticulous, because it's the length of time that Westerners don't like. It is certainly not the brutality. The West is totally blind to the brutality of a wide variety of regimes around the planet that don't care about human rights. Israel does care about human rights, including the human rights of its enemies. And yet somehow it is still ripped. And that is a function of the impatience of the West rather than a function of the West's adherence to human rights as a core value.
How do you think the Israeli media handling these events?
Well, I mean, I don't think that all the media there is the same, but I think that there's a bunch of trash outlets over there. I mean, I think that Haaretz is awful. Maybe the worst publication in the Western world. It has been trashed for as long as I have been alive, and it does nothing but provide sustenance and succor for the enemies of not only Israel, but Western civilization more broadly, including to terrorist groups. I think that the bizarre hatred for Prime Minister Netanyahu that's been evidenced on the part of some of the more mainstream legacy outlets in Israel has been really damaging, because one of the things that drives me nuts about watching what's been going on there from afar is if you wish to posit an alternative, then please, by all means, do so. I mean, if you don't like the policy that's being pursued by the government, then anytime you can step forward and say clearly and succinctly what your policy would be and why it's not being pursued. But that is rarely the case. Instead, it just seems to be endless criticism culminating in massive protests to do what precisely? What deal do people think is on the table that the government is currently refusing that would be sustainable, would lead to fulfillment of the war goals? This is the part that I find problematic. And again, it's not unique to Israel. That is present. That same dynamic is present in the United States as well.
There's only one way to defeat terrorism, and that is to win. You do not win wars with ceasefires. You do not win wars by losing.
Do you see this war ends without defeating Hamas?
I mean, it's hard to determine what exactly defeating Hamas means. So in terms of Hamas being an ongoing military threat to the state of Israel, the war has already achieved the end of that. Hamas is not an ongoing existential threat to the state of Israel at this point. What Israel is afraid of, obviously, is a recapitulation of the last 20 years, that Hamas will come back in, will rearm, and then will pose such a threat. I don't think that Israel will be foolish enough to end the war with that as an ongoing problem. With that said, one of the big problems, obviously, in the Gaza Strip is the enormous amount of sympathy that Hamas has with the general population. We are still living in a world in which zero tips have come in, despite a $10 million reward offered for the location and freeing of the hostages. That says something about the level of control that Hamas continues to have in the minds of many Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And it also speaks to the mentality of many people who are living in the Gaza Strip. So if the idea is that defeating Hamas amounts to the establishment of a moderate Palestinian government, first you'd have to name me who would lead that government, what that would actually look like. And again, there are not a lot of candidates out there for that. So a realistic end to the war probably looks like some sort of international coalition that supervises a level of domestic rule, not the PA, not Hamas. There's some form of Jenin-like domestic rule with Israeli security apparatus, with the capacity to actually go in and perform cleanup operations. It means a security border all along the wall, meaning territory that becomes Israeli territory that is annexed to Israel, because there has to be some consequence to what happened on October 7th. It means that given the fact that enormous portions of the Gaza Strip are now uninhabitable, that people who wish to leave should be allowed to leave, obviously. It's the only situation in human history of which I'm aware where refugees who wish to leave are being told that they cannot leave, which is kind of an amazing thing. And obviously, you know, is that going to end Hamas? Again, it depends on your definition here.
שפירו הוא אחד הפרשנים החשובים והבולטים בתקשורת האמריקאית. בין הצעירים היהודים אולי המשפיעים והמוכרים ביותר. כנראה שגם בגלל זה נבחר בשנה שעברה לשים משואה בטקס הדלקת המשואות בהר הרצל. בחירה שגררה סערה בעקבות דעותיו של שפירו בנושאים הקשורים למגדר ולקהילה הטרנסג'נדרית, שהפריעו לקבוצות מסוימות שחלקן מזהות עם התנועה הפרוגרסיבית.
You're not being polite to the pronouns.
Because
disrespectful.
Okay, forget about the disrespect. Facts don't care about your feelings. How he feels on the inside is irrelevant to the question of his biological.
זה לא גורע מההתרגשות של שפירו מהזכות להדליק משואה.
I mean, it was an enormous privilege. I think that what it spoke to, you know, for me, was the fact that I believe that Israel is on the front lines of the war for a civilization that is a threat by barbarians like Hamas and by its allies, who many of whom are in the West, actually. And so lighting that torch in honor of a country that has stood up to those barbarians for 80 years and whose population has put itself in harm's way in order to not just stand up for its own existence, but to stand up for a civilization that very often wants to essentially surrender its sense of itself. It's an amazing thing Israel has done over the course of the last several years, and I hope the rest of the world takes an example of it, and I was honored to be able to participate.
The capital P, Philistines of yesterday, have become the Philistines, small p, of today. And those Philistines do indeed march alongside Hamas and its allies, seeking the destruction of the West and its culture. They must be stopped. And they can only be stopped if the West stops being ashamed of itself and begins to defend its own values. Thank you.
Ben Shapiro, thank you very much.
Thanks.
As a Jew and as an American, I light this torch in honor of Israel.